The affair rumor isn't the scandal. The real scandal is who's pushing it, and why everyone keeps falling for it. Apparently, the official cover story is that Vernon is meeting Sharon for singing lessons, because nothing says vocal coaching like furtive glances and conveniently timed rendezvous. Of course, it could be an affair, because the staging practically begs for it. Or it could be the classic soap maneuver, dangle scandal in front of the audience, and then act offended when anyone notices. Either way, Sharon's lingering attention on that incriminating photo suggests the moral compass is already pointing due south, and if self-preservation were a character trait in this universe, someone would keep her as far away from Leslie as possible. Leslie, meanwhile, is busy doing what she does best, manufacturing chaos with a straight face, spreading rumors about Vernon, pushing the narrative until it becomes common knowledge, and then having the astonishing nerve to demand entry into Nicole's son's home while insisting everyone should get over the past. That is not closure, it is entitlement wearing perfume. Ted had better not buy what Leslie is selling, because the consequences will not be subtle, and neither will the fallout. While the adults audition for the title of most exhausting person in the room, the show drops a far heavier storyline: Anita's breast cancer diagnosis. The emotional impact lands because it is real, it is terrifying, and it leaves very little space for the frivolity surrounding it. A clinical trial is positioned as a possible lifeline. Anita may have a stronger chance than Peaches, whose situation feels more ominous, though even a temporary improvement could matter. The Duprees are headed straight into a heartache arc, and the question is not whether it will hurt. It is how many people will make it about themselves before the credits roll. Speaking of self-centered plot choices, Nicole dating Carlton invites the kind of romantic complication soap operas treat as an Olympic sport. And then there is the even more delicate landmine, Kat's mother dating Carlton, who happens to be Ted's best friend and business partner, because boundaries are apparently a myth. The predictable argument will be that Ted cheated, therefore anything goes. That logic is convenient, not coherent. Friends and best friends have historically been off-limits for a reason, and approving this arrangement while clutching pearls over Ted's behavior would be a masterclass in hypocrisy. On the brighter side, Andre and Danny's chemistry is one of the few dynamics that feels intentionally rewarding rather than accidentally disastrous. Andre seeking Ted for fatherly advice also tracks, given the family ties, yet the conspicuous absence of deeper interactions between Andre and his cousins Kat and Martin remains a glaring oversight that deserves correction. Elsewhere, Lynette's reappearance raises questions, especially with Isaiah's past trouble and the implication that Elon had to step in to resolve it. The suspicion that Isaiah may have been running a scam at some point is not exactly a stretch in a world where sincerity is rare and accountability is seasonal. As for why Isaiah does not recognize Haley, the simplest explanation is the most plausible. Their paths may never have crossed, and the show is counting on that ambiguity to keep the audience debating. The fandom's obsession with forecasting the future is already in full swing, with 2026 predictions flying fast, Kat ending things with Tomas pivoting toward Eva as the better fit, Kat and Isaiah igniting into something intense, and Kat and Eva eventually repairing their relationship. Add to that the claim that Eva is not Ted's daughter, that Peach's husband, or someone else entirely, could be her father, and that Ted and Shanice will tumble into a serious love story while Nicole sabotages her own prospects because her heart is still with Ted, only to realize it too late. Then, to complete the arc of inevitable consequences, Leslie allegedly blows through money and ends up in jail, neatly packaging greed and recklessness into a predictable conclusion the character will still somehow act surprised by. Even the smaller moments underline the same theme. When Dana suggests tagging along with Ted and Eva to Martin's, Ted's reaction is practically a public service announcement. No, the past is not being recycled. And no, nostalgia is not an invitation. In the end, the show's operating principle remains intact. Everyone wants forgiveness, nobody wants restraint, and the audience is expected to applaud the audacity while bracing for the next twist that was telegraphed weeks in advance. Never trust a soap that makes you pity Vanessa, and then acts like that was your idea. Someone, somewhere, inevitably knows the name of the song playing while Nicole and Carlton staged their little picnic by the fireplace performance. It is a minor detail, of course, except on a show like this, where even background music can feel more committed than half the relationships. The writing, unfortunately, is committed. Uncomfortably so. The plotting has that polished, soap-operatic confidence that keeps stacking complications with the calm precision of people who know the audience will show up tomorrow anyway. Case in point, Ted cheerfully gossiping with Leslie and Dana about Vernon, as if character assassination is just another recreational activity. Diabolical is not an exaggeration. It is the job description, and then there is the show's favorite pastime, manipulating sympathy. Vanessa, who displayed all the emotional investment of a closed door when Doug was in the picture, somehow ends up drawing pity anyway. That is either a testament to how effectively the writing reframes villains as misunderstood, or a reminder that viewers can be persuaded to feel sorry for almost anyone if the lighting is soft enough and the dialogue hits the right bruises. Meanwhile, Eva's evolution into Dana's orbit continues to scramble allegiances in the most inconvenient way. Turning into Dana, while inadvertently making Kat more appealing, is the kind of narrative sabotage that should require a permit. The rivalry itself is practically contractual at this point, yet it is hard to name a single moment when Kat genuinely gave Eva a chance, or when Eva returned the favor. It is less a feud than a long-running refusal to behave like adults in the same zip code. Naturally, there is also the classic soap temptation to manufacture a family tree twist, because nothing says true fashion like discovering that Leslie and Shanice could be half-siblings. It is the genre's equivalent of a fire drill, chaotic, predictable, and somehow treated as a revelation every time. Then comes the compulsory toxic love phenomenon, the character who inspires devotion, disgust, and reluctant applause all at once. Joey fits the profile perfectly, especially when comparisons start bleeding in from other roles and other dynamics. Ryan's menace, Joey's interactions with Vanessa, and the echo of a redemption arc that finally bothered to stand up for Laura. The casting only amplifies the effect. John Lindstrom's ability to inhabit multiple identities, one good, one evil, all convincingly lived in, does not merely elevate the material. It exposes how thin the material would look without him. The lingering question, of course, is whether Joey's attachment to Vanessa is real and deep, or simply another iteration of a man performing intimacy with professional skill. As for the romantic cheerleading section, the Shanice and Ted pairing comes with a practical problem the show is eager to treat like a footnote: the stepmother question. The fantasy of romance is easy. The reality of being stepmother to Martin, Kat, and Eva is where idealism goes to die. The wider canvas is crowded, as always. Sharon remains a master class in how to make patience feel like a character flaw in the audience. Vernon's storyline intersects with the slow surfacing of Haley's true evilness, as though the show cannot resist announcing that the mask is slipping, then taking 3 more episodes to actually remove it. Nicole, for her part, continues to operate as if confusion is a lifestyle brand, while Leslie and Marcel persist in generating the kind of creep factor usually reserved for characters who eventually end up in a police file. At least one interaction lands with the weight it should. Vernon speaking to Andre man-to-man, father-in-law to son-in-law. In a series where direct communication is treated like a rare medical condition, a straightforward conversation feels almost radical. And then the show introduces the storyline it cannot afford to mishandle: Anita and cancer. Of course it did. Because if there is a narrative lever guaranteed to yank emotions on command, it is illness, especially one that carries real-world grief for countless families. The storyline may aim to be informative and educational, emphasizing early detection and the reality that a diagnosis is not automatically a death sentence. That intention is commendable. It is also the bare minimum. If the writers insist on bringing cancer to the forefront, the expectation follows: advocacy, sensitivity, clear information about treatment options, and an avoidance of cheap decline-for-drama theatrics that reduce lived experience to a ratings device. Entertainment does not excuse carelessness, and audiences will notice the difference between awareness and exploitation. Carlton's arc, meanwhile, continues to perform its own contradiction. Apparently desperate for Nicole, yet perpetually too busy to be in the room. Nothing says devotion like consistently having somewhere else to be. Finally, the jealousy math writes itself. Kat's resentment toward Eva reads less like righteous indignation and more like the bitterness of watching someone become everything she is not. Accomplished, resilient, and arguably better at the same game. The divorce and Tomas narrative is a convenient prop, and Tomas himself inspires little more than a weary shrug. The only unresolved plea hovering over it all is simple. Anita cannot be written off as collateral damage for a very special episode. If the show is going to take this route, it should do what it claims to do. Handle it with care, raise awareness responsibly, and offer something more than emotional extraction. And if the subject feels delicate, it is. Responses should reflect that. Do not trust the preview. It's engineered to distract you, while the real plot quietly sharpens the knife. The preview finally manages to look competent, seasonal warmth, family logistics, and just enough impending disaster to keep the holiday lights from feeling decorative. Anita does the rare thing television spouses almost never do. She tells Vernon her results instead of weaponizing silence, and then promptly pivots toward a best, happiest Christmas tour that includes visiting Danny and then Martin, because nothing says peace on earth. Like sprinting between households, while everyone pretends the air is not thick with unfinished business. Meanwhile, Shanice and Ted are tucked away in a hotel, which is either a harmless detour or the show telegraphing the next unexpected connection with all the subtlety of a marching band. Vernon and Sharon appear to be circling the Tracy conversation again, as if repetition might eventually produce clarity. Danny's family celebration lands as the obligatory holiday palate cleanser, punctuated by Haley telling Bill to forget about the Dupree, an instruction delivered with the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who have never met Bill. And then there's the quietly bleak question hovering over it all. Will Haley, Randy, and Bill celebrate Christmas together, like an oddly constructed family unit trying to convince itself that togetherness is not just a scheduling exercise? Because Christmas for two can be sad, and Christmas for three can be a negotiation. At least the anticipation for Isaiah and Eva offers a promise of something fresh, assuming the story actually follows through instead of dangling them like ornaments no one is allowed to touch. Leslie and Peaches, now properly identified as Peaches Evans, lean into the sentimental scrapbook material, revisiting Dana's childhood paper chain traditions and the ice skating memories tied to Eva and her father, all while Dana worries about living life from the sidelines, a fear delivered with enough emotional clarity to remind everyone what this show can do when it stops juggling gimmicks. Of course, emotional sincerity never travels alone. It arrives with accusations. Leslie informs Ted that Vernon is having an affair, and the clarification matters. The target is not Bill, which is almost amusing in a world where everyone is perpetually one misunderstanding away from a bonfire. Ted's holiday plan is equally telling, Christmas at Martin's, with Eva as the +1, while Dana and Leslie are notably not invited. It is less romance than risk management, since Ted apparently understands that Martin and Smitty would not applaud a festive surprise featuring the wrong companion. Elsewhere, Kat's holiday placement raises its own questions. Time with Nicole and Aunt Danny at Andre and Danny's home suggests an attempt at stability, which in this universe usually means a secret is about to kick down the door. Carlton, predictably, looks like he is hiding something. The old warning that something in the milk isn't clean fits because the story has trained its audience to assume every calm surface is concealing residue. And Tomas continues to perform the classic relationship paradox. The traits he claims to admire in Kat are the same ones he seems poised to punish, because nothing says devotion like resenting the very backbone that drew him in. If Ted and Shanice do end up spending more time together, the show will surely present it as fate rather than convenience, but the pairing has enough narrative friction to be plausible. The truly shameless pitch, however, belongs to the soapier speculation. Peaches dying while saving Anita via some dramatic organ transplant twist would be peak daytime melodrama, Absurd, emotionally manipulative, and exactly the kind of thing this genre will do while smiling innocently. Still, the standout remains the conversation between Andre and Anita. A rare scene with actual weight, where vulnerability is not treated as weakness, but as overdue honesty, and Andre hears what he needed to hear without the usual posturing. Even the side chatter about Trisha's appearances elsewhere can't derail the simplest truth. The styling work on her hair deserves its own contract renewal. It shows up prepared, polished, and unbothered by the plot's chaos. Underneath all the holiday drama sits a thread that is not entertainment at all. The cancer storyline is hitting hard, and it's doing so because it mirrors the real pattern. Results, calls from a primary care physician, the sudden shift from routine life to a day that becomes permanently time-stamped in memory. The emotional response makes sense, and the reminder matters. Screening saves lives, and mammograms and MRIs catch what denial never will. Of course, the audience commentary machine keeps running. There's curiosity about whether the cast takes any of these character critiques personally. While the show continues to feed the Sharon narrative with relentless consistency, Sharon is not merely interested in Vernon. She reads like someone rehearsing for Anita's vacancy, jealous of the relationship, fixated on photos, cycling through expressions that practically audition for the role of next in line, if Anita were to pass. And Tomas may want to keep his footing, but his days look numbered the moment he starts investigating the other woman and uncovers a connection to Haley. Because nothing accelerates a downfall like believing curiosity will stay contained. As for the Peaches storyline fatigue, it is understandable. Either let her heal or let her exit with dignity, because the prolonged limbo feels less like suspense and more like stalling. Though, if the story chooses tragedy, Leslie appears ready to deliver the kind of performance that wins scenes, not just episodes. And in the final twist of restraint, the show signals that Vernon may not even be cheating at all, just taking singing lessons, with the inevitable reveal slated for a Christmas Eve show. Because nothing says trust rebuilt like learning the scandal was actually rehearsal. Everyone's mad about Nicole dating, but somehow a married man flirting gets a free pass. That's not drama, that's hypocrisy with theme music. Carlton, for better or worse, has decided subtlety is for other people. While Ted is out there purchasing bird feeders like a man auditioning for the role of harmless background character, Carlton is busy pursuing what he wants with the single-minded confidence of someone who never met a boundary he couldn't negotiate into irrelevance. The problem is that his ambition doesn't come with the courtesy of consistency. Winterfest brought a family emergency. Now Nicole's plans are being kneecapped by a niece's Christmas pageant. Fascinating how every time Nicole wants forward motion, Carlton suddenly discovers a new obligation. Divorced or not, the pattern reads less like commitment and more like gatekeeping with better lighting. And Nicole, as always, looks like she stepped out of a wardrobe department's victory lap. Excellent styling, excellent figure, and apparently a dating life that inspires moral outrage in some corners. It is remarkable how quickly the alarm bells ring over divorced Nicole going on dates with single Carlton, while married Marcel kissing and flirting with the resident chaos agent barely gets the same scrutiny. Priorities are clearly in order. A woman moving on is the scandal, but a man wandering is just complicated. Consistency, once again, remains a rare guest star. Meanwhile, the show continues its favorite pastime, dangling an affair storyline over Vernon like a shiny object, then acting surprised when everyone gets whiplash. Leslie, because there must always be someone committed to making everything worse, decides to plant the idea of Vernon cheating, conveniently dropping it into Teddy's world as if sabotage is a community service. The result is predictable: frantic speculation, emotional exhaustion, and the familiar plea for the writers to stop playing with the idea and simply let Vernon be a decent man. Of course, there's also the grim counterpoint. Some would prefer cheating to cancer, which says less about romance and more about how terrified people are of what's coming. If the choice is betrayal or illness, the fact that betrayal seems like the gentler option tells the whole story. Because the real engine of this week's emotional impact is Anita's breast cancer storyline, and it is not being treated like disposable drama. The narrative is positioned to do something television rarely manages, without turning it into spectacle. Illuminate the stakes, particularly for Black women, where disparities in screening, diagnosis timing, and outcomes are not theoretical. The writing is leaning into awareness without losing the character's centrality. Anita is framed as the glue holding the family together, which is precisely why the diagnosis lands like a structural threat, not a side plot. It is also why the audience reaction splits into two impulses at once: grief that it's happening at all, and insistence that it will not end in tragedy. The certainty that Anita is not going to die reads less like spoiler confidence and more like collective refusal to accept another story where survival is treated as optional. The public service messaging arrives with the blunt force it deserves. If over 40, get a mammogram. Early detection matters. And for anyone still clinging to the myth that this is only a women's issue, men get breast cancer too. The uncomfortable reality beneath the advice is that access and responsiveness are not guaranteed. Being refused a mammogram at 26, despite persistent pain, being shuffled into an ultrasound, being told it is probably period-related, and then continuing to deal with symptoms years later is not an anecdote. It is a portrait of how easily legitimate concern gets minimized, especially when age becomes an excuse for dismissal rather than a factor in thorough evaluation. Add the complication of dense or thick breast tissue, harder to read, easier to wave away, and the storyline stops being just television and starts looking like a mirror. The rest of the cast dynamics continue to churn in the background. Because this show never met a calm week, it didn't want to sabotage. There is curiosity about what Vernon and Sharon are really doing, alongside irritation at Sharon's lingering attention, less intrigue, more lingering menace. There is also the quieter question of Leslie's origins. The mother is known, but the father remains conspicuously absent, which suggests the writers are holding a card they plan to slam onto the table later. Danny's carpet picnic misunderstanding provides the brief comic relief, an accidental reminder that this universe still contains jokes, even when it's busy handing out emotional bruises. As for Ted and Shanice, the chemistry is getting noticed, and with that comes the inevitable paranoia about motives and fallout. Will Nicole read Shanice's involvement as a setup, an angle, a scheme to get closer to Ted by way of a conveniently placed doctor? Perhaps. Or perhaps this is simply the show doing what it always does, introducing a relationship that looks harmless until the writers remember they're paid to manufacture tension. A practical note, because panic has a short shelf life. Next week is a holiday week, which likely means fewer episodes. The gates may open briefly, not endlessly, so the dramatic forecasting can stand down. The larger point is simple. The show is finally putting its weight behind a storyline that matters, and it appears ready to demand better from the audience than casual consumption. If the acting rises to the material, and there are already signs it will, this could become the rare arc that produces something meaningful rather than merely shocking. The hope, clearly, is that Anita joins the list of survivors, that something good is born out of the fear, and that the writers resist the cheap temptation of turning illness into an excuse for melodrama. There is plenty of mess elsewhere. This plotline does not need more. They want you focused on whether Vernon cheated. The real scandal is who benefits from the rumor. If Vernon is concealing anything remotely inappropriate with Sharon, the fallout will not be contained to polite whispers and meaningful glances. Those two ex-sons-in-law will excavate the story with the enthusiasm of demolition crews and deposit it directly at his daughter's feet, ensuring maximum collateral damage for the one person who least deserves it, Anita. And that is the cruel irony. While Anita is facing a breast cancer diagnosis, the family may also be preparing for the kind of truth reveal that always arrives when everyone is emotionally depleted and least able to process it. Naturally, the timing would be impeccable in the worst possible way. Anita gathers the family to share her diagnosis, hoping for unity, and instead gets a front-row seat to whatever rumor mill has been grinding behind her back. Which brings the narrative's most reliable pollutant into view. Leslie, also known as Dana when it suits the occasion, operating as a one-person crisis factory. The accusation being floated is simple enough. Leslie plants the idea that Vernon is cheating on Anita. Ted hears it, and Ted, never one to let good judgment interrupt a confrontation, marches off to challenge Vernon on an alleged affair. The likely result is not heroic accountability, but Vernon checking Ted with the force of a man who will not be lectured on loyalty by someone taking direction from Leslie. And when Anita learns that Leslie has been spreading this story, it will not be received as concerned advocacy. It will land as what it is: sabotage wrapped in feigned righteousness. The anticipated payoff is equally obvious: Leslie's eventual humiliation when it becomes clear there was no affair to begin with, just Sharon projecting interest and everyone else projecting chaos. Sharon may be looking. Vernon, however, appears to have eyes only for Anita. It is almost disappointing how uncomplicated that part is. Still, if the writers insist on twisting the knife, there are more inventive options than the tired, maybe he cheated refrain. A more ambitious turn would be exposing Leslie's long game, making her someone else's child, with Peaches revealed as Barbara and therefore Leslie's biological mother, conveniently explained by the fact that Anita's circle has not met Peaches and would have no reason to recognize her, or rerouting paternity entirely, making Peaches' husband or Carlton the father of Eva instead of Ted, then detonating the family with the revelation that Leslie manipulated Ted, Nicole, and Eva into believing Ted slept with her during a drunken lapse. That would not merely upset Nicole, it would fracture her, especially if it also emerges that Carlton is Eva's father, and the deception was engineered long ago. These are the kinds of twists that actually generate story rather than recycle suspicion. Of course, none of Leslie's mess-making exists in a vacuum, particularly with the unresolved matter of her attempt on Laura's life. There is a looming concern that the show will treat attempted murder like an inconvenient misunderstanding. Minimal consequences, brief outrage, and then back to business as usual. Laura is alive, and that survival may be used as an excuse to soften the outcome, especially if Leslie's money secures strong legal representation. Whether that result feels satisfying is one question, whether it is plausible is another. And yet, the moral outrage selectively deployed here is its own performance. The insistence that Leslie must be punished to the fullest extent, while simultaneously rationalizing other wrongdoing when it is committed by favored characters. What Martin permitted Vernon to do, covering up a serious situation, was presented as more understandable, even when the reality remains blunt. Law is law, and covering up is still wrong. Fear, including fear rooted in racism, may explain decisions, but it does not magically erase responsibility. That same logic is precisely why Eva's refusal to report her mother is not a mystery. It is loyalty entangled with consequence, the very dynamic others excuse when it benefits their preferred narrative. Hovering over all of this is Anita's diagnosis, which should not be treated as a plot device for maximum holiday spectacle. The most effective version of this storyline is not a death sentence draped in melodrama, but a sober reminder: breast cancer is not inherently synonymous with inevitability, and the story can, without becoming preachy, underscore the value of routine medical care and annual checkups. If Anita wants Christmas to be big, best, and unforgettable, it should be because she is reclaiming joy in the middle of a frightening reality, not because everyone else chooses that moment to weaponize rumors, stage confrontations, and audition for the role of the family's most destructive liability. If the writers wreck Vernon and Anita for cheap shock value, it will be self-inflicted damage. Next week arrives with the annual tradition of audiences mistaking a holiday schedule for a network conspiracy, 2 episodes, likely Monday and Tuesday, because Wednesday and Thursday belong to the calendar, not the production team. Panic is optional, not required. What should require explanation, however, is the baffling serenity of Peaches in the face of Leslie walking off with her husband as if grand larceny comes with a gift receipt. That same Leslie, distinguished by a pointed chin and an even sharper instinct for crossing lines, had the audacity to come for Samantha, and the correct response from June and Naomi would have been immediate removal from Orphe Jeans, because children are not plot collateral. Meanwhile, the Ted situation continues to beg for adult supervision. The idea of Ted circling back to Nicole is less romance and more repeat offense, especially when the surrounding conduct, particularly anything involving Calton, reads as trash behavior with a glossy finish. Against this swirl of infidelity fatigue and recycled chaos, at least one couple is allowed to behave like adults. Andre remains unreasonably handsome and, more importantly, consistently affectionate toward Danny, an actual relationship dynamic, not a transactional ceasefire. That steadiness matters because the writing has chosen a heavier lane with Anita's test results coming back malignant. The choice is sobering, and it deserves careful handling, not melodramatic shortcuts. Breast cancer is not seasonal programming. It does not pause for holidays, and it does not discriminate by age or gender. The notion that serious storytelling spoils a holiday week is precious in the way only avoidable ignorance can be. Education and follow-through are the point, and soaps have a long history of earning respect precisely when they elevate health issues that other genres prefer to ignore. Without that grounding, the format collapses into an endless loop of sex, lies, and recording devices, briefly titillating, quickly exhausting. If the writers commit to the reality of this storyline, Anita's illness could become something rarer than a secret paternity test, a credible reason for characters to stop sniping long enough to find forgiveness, come together, and support her through what follows. Advanced teasers hint that Ted will have 3 Christmas visitors. The hope is that Martin, Kat, and Eva are the ones who show up, because nothing says growth like choosing meaningful connections over predictable dysfunction. And should this arc be carried with the weight it merits, the performances, particularly from Tamara Tooney, may deliver the kind of acting that reminds audiences why this genre still works when it stops treating consequences as optional. Finally, in a landscape saturated with adultery marketed as destiny, it is genuinely refreshing to see Vernon and Anita depicted as devoted and in love. That marriage does not need sabotage to stay interesting, and it certainly does not need to be fixed by breaking it first.